Yeah, yeah, yeah. Baby, yeah. You know, say ready for this. You know I have patience.
Greetings for another episode of the Grand Rise Collective podcast. I'm one of your established co-hosts, Kyle Dixon, along with my other co-host, partner in podcast, Kyrie De Bentley. And we have a stunning episode for y'all today, man. We got somebody in here that's a good friend of mine, a colleague. Just a very talented, special person that's doing a lot of great things. And I'm glad to have her. Miss Sydney Chatman is in the house. With our platform, you all, as we've told y'all many times before, the platform is built to engage, inform, inspire, and empower you in various aspects of your life, in various times in your life. And we really want to make sure that you are really just inspired to do things that you may want to do or have ideas about. And with this platform, as we call it, the Grand Rising Collective, I'm your co-host, Kyle Dixon, and to give a little background, educator for almost 20 years, media production company, activist in the community with youth advocacy, and also dealing with just education in general. And we created the platform Grand Rising Collective to be a reminder as a saying in the morning, like good morning, we say Grand Rising. So it's not only to be at your best all the time, every day, 365, but a constant reminder to rise to the occasion when you use obstacles and difficulties in your life. So with this platform, we hope to give you some solutions for those things. All right. So without further ado, I want to introduce my co-host, Kyrie De Bentley, my man, 100 grand. Take it away, man.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. I'm going to try and be real brief. Usually my intros are real long. So let me try and just narrow it down. My name is Kyrie De Bentley. I'm the president and founder of an organization called 4Ts, which stands for Teaching Teens to Think. I think it's important that you know my background so that way you know who's talking to you as well as who you're listening to. As the mission of my organization, Teaching Teens to Think, is to help inner city youth identify their inherent skill set so that way they can use it to leverage their opportunities in regards to establishing a career and ultimately starting a business if they choose to. The other hat that I wear is as a professor at Fordham University, where I teach in reference to social justice, social services, where I help students who are pursuing their master's degree start their own organization to help the inner city as well. In addition to that hat, I sit on the advisory board of LIU, Long Island University, to the same capacity where I'm helping students who are pursuing their education, their masters, things of that nature to contribute to society, make society a better place. All this ties into helping the neighborhood, which is so-called classified as a community, to inform them, to enlighten them. This is why my being a part of Grand Rising Collective is so important, because it gives us a platform in which to disseminate that information to a larger base, a larger audience, which is why I'm honored to be a part of Grand Rising Collective, which is what Kyle elaborated on. So in my effort to be real brief, that's it. That's my introduction. I'm not going to say any more. If you want any more information, please feel free to contact me, but you'll know how I do. And you know how Cal do. And like Cal said, he bought another banger. We got Sydney here in the building. So far, I've seen her work, y'all. I've seen her work. Sydney, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. First, thank you for having me on your Grand Rising Collective podcast. I actually love the term Grand Rising. I like saying Grand Rising instead of good morning, because I believe that words have spells. And if you say things that you really believe, then that will manifest and come back to you. So Grand Rising to you all, even though we are now in the afternoon hour.
Right.
But it's in the morning somewhere, right? So
Right, exactly.
So my name is Sydney Chatman, and I am a director, writer, an educator, and producer in Chicago, but I am from born and raised from Gary, Indiana, so I have to represent GI to the day I die. You got to get a good lesson, right? Like, I'm still from the hood. Just don't let these classes fool you. So, I'm still from the hood. So, but I live in Chicago, and I've been living in Chicago for 17 years now. And in this time, I have worked in the theater community as well as the school community and education. And I call myself a theatrical abolitionist. So we can talk a little bit more about what that means.
Definitely.
But yeah, so what else do you need to know? I write plays and I direct plays, and I have a theater company called the TOFU Chitlin Circuit. So I have to say it slow sometimes because when I say it too fast, people say tofu chicken. I'm like, no, it's tofu chitlins. They don't exist. It's in a company form. So there I am.
Okay, cool. And no diss to your name because I love the name, but I'm glad the tofu chitlins don't exist. I'm not a chitlin.
I saw something one time when they were somebody kind of created them.
Oh.
It was something weird. It was like this. I don't know if it was real. It was just somebody made some sort of a version of like what a tofu chitlin would look like. But you know, tofu the reason why I even called it tofu chitlin.
Yes, why? Why is that?
Shout out to my friend Enoch DeMar. When I was trying to figure out what type of theater I wanted to create on my own, because I did a lot of Black theater in Chicago. I was trying to think about what is missing in the Chicago community, and really nothing is missing. We have people who are teaching, we have people who are big theater, small theater, youth theater. But I thought it was important that whatever I do for my company or for myself, I can go into any type of community and take on the mission of that community and create work for that community. So tofu is like that. You know, you put it in a dish, you can make it taste like barbecue, you can make it taste like, Thai food. So tofu is like that thing that kind of creates. Now, what's funny is I can't eat tofu anymore. I'm allergic to soy. So I can't eat it. And I actually tried to eat something today that has some soy in it, like a soy headache. It's such a weird thing. Wow. I get like this headache from eating it. But yeah, so the Chitlin Circuit part actually comes from the historical context of Chitlin Circuits, which were a string of venues in the South in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, where Black musicians would perform because they were not allowed to perform in larger venues because they were Black. So I took on that Chitlin Circuit title because being in Chicago, it has a rich history of the blues and jazz. And I moved to a neighborhood called Bronzeville, not Brownsville, but Bronzeville, that symbolizes that work ethic. So Chitlin Circuit is for that reason, but it's also a play on words because Chitlin Circuit was also named for lowbrow theater. So it turned into this lowbrow theater conversation. So if you looked at a Tyler Perry type play, they would call it that Chitlin Circuit because it did the same thing. It would travel from city to city.
Right.
So I took on the name to repurpose it, re-energize it, and give it some more life. So that's what the Chitlin Circuit is.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. She stays busy. Stays busy. Yeah. So Sid, real cool. I want to go into the question, right? So, in reference, like you said, the Tofu Chitlin Circuit, words have power. In reference of you being an artist, how do you see? And it's kind of a two-part question. How do you see art in itself, as far as you being an educator, right, and teaching art and doing art? But also, when you mentioned Chicago, how important has it been for the art scene in Chicago for companies like yours or people doing the work that you're doing?
See, I've been around. So I've lived in New York. I worked on Broadway, and I really thought, okay, I'm going to move to New York when I'm done with school, and I'm going to make it. And probably around 2018, and this is going to sound crazy, I went out to New York to visit my sister, and I went to go see a bunch of plays. And I was like, this city needs a lot of work, a lot of infrastructure, because if something happens, this city would not be able to cope. There's so many people in this city. And look, 2020 comes and, New York was the hub, the center of a lot of the pandemic issues with people living close in proximity to each other to, not having a really clean system. In Chicago, we have alleys, so you can throw trash in alleys. What a concept. So, so it's in New York, you're like, wow, this city really, and I made the decision then to say, this may not be where I'm supposed to be. As much as I wanted to live there and, that's where all of the stuff is happening, where people's careers are made. I feel like Chicago was where I needed to be, particularly in the Midwest, close enough to Gary, Indiana, which is where I spend a lot of time as well, collaborating, trying to build artistic practices there as well. So why Chicago? Because it's much more convenient to do the work that I'm doing here financially. I can get a building, I can get a space, and if I can't get the building right now, I can use a space that maybe the city will allow you to use, and you can acquire it later. It's a lot of different programs here where you can find your way making it as an artist. So that's why I stayed here. I wish the weather was better, because then I would definitely never leave. But there are days when, like last week, we didn't see the sun for 7-8 days, and I was like, I'm losing it, because we're all inside right now, so I'm inside, I'm teaching remotely, and I'm also seeing these same 4 gray walls and the same gray sky. I was like, I'm gonna need a sun lamp or something, like to make it. So I think that it's I don't want to say it's convenient, like it's easy, but it's still hard here. It's still hard, it's still a lot that you have to do to make it. But there is a lot of opportunity here that a lot of people don't know about, because they just assume like Chicago is the second city. It's second to New York. But I just feel like artistically, we're up there, and I feel like people here, aside from the pandemic, I feel like people here can really create and do work freely, without a lot of constraints. And being in New York, I noticed that it was just like people were working for someone else, where here you can kind of create your own. You don't have to wait to get a job. You don't have to wait to create something, which is that's one of the reasons why I started the TOFU CHITLIN CIRCUIT, because I wasn't going to wait for someone to give me a directing job. Well, I was just going to create the work and make it myself. So, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, nice.
Love it. Love that. Shoot.
And then some.
Okay. Well, I have a lot of questions that I want to ask, but I'm gonna try and stick to the theme. You mentioned Chicago. How is living in Chicago now during COVID, as it relates to gentrification, politics, voting people in the arts? With all its creativity, all its opportunities, and everything like that. You see how New York has been hit and affected. Has the same impact had on Chicago?
Oh yeah, I mean, as an artist, I was just saying to one of my friends yesterday, that I kind of teetered the line between being an artist and being a full independent artist, because I have a full-time job as a teacher. So I teach theater for elementary age children. I go up to about middle school, and then like the oldest student that I taught now is probably like in their 30s, like early 30s, which, I mean, look at me.
Yeah, right, black don't crack.
I don't know how I could even have kids that young, but I do. I've been teaching for 17 years. And so I've kind of teetered that line between, working as an artist, and I'm very picky about what I choose to do outside of the projects that I create, and then being a teacher. So I noticed that the city has not done enough to support independent artists who have been working, grinding, only being artists, or then, or supplementing their income in the industry, like food industry and restaurant industries. They haven't done enough. Like there were some grant opportunities that they were giving out, like $1,000. When you think about the rent in certain places in Chicago are past that, I pay more than $1,000 for rent, but I'm also living alone, where there's some folks who are, they may have 2 or 3 roommates, and they're trying to take care of themselves. And you can do it, but the city, I don't feel like the city did enough to support artists as a whole, and then realize how important art is to all of our communities, that we can't function without going to a restaurant, or going to the movies, or going to see a play, or going to a music concert. All of that is connected, and what's unfortunate is that we live in a society that puts profit over people, and said, okay, well, y'all okay over here. We're going to give you a little bit of something to satisfy you for this month. But at the end of the day, these big corporations and businesses have gotten bailouts when we are all suffering, So city you know, in terms of like what's happening pandemic wise, like people are still out in the streets. They're still protesting. They're protesting now about the gentleman in Philly who was killed by the police just recently.
Right.
You know, so people haven't stopped. It's just that we have to get creative in how we support each other. So there's mutual aids that people have created. There's food, you know, systems where people are giving out boxes of food. You know, things like that people are doing to kind of support each other, but that's just still not enough. You know, people want to be comfortable in the way that they've been living before, but we can't be comfortable anymore for anybody, you know, for anyone's sake. So that's what's happening in Chicago. Yes, the industry has been hit hard. A lot of my friends are not working. The good thing is that Zoom performances have started, you know, but I wonder how exhausted people are, because I'm totally exhausted with Zoom performances and Zoom meetings and Zoom conversations. I'm tired of it. You know, I'm tired of looking at myself in the screen. So like, I would love it if we could have some more personal interactions. But until that comes, you know, this is the life we're in right now. It could have been avoided, right? Like all of this could have been avoided. All of this could have been avoided had we known way before March. I have a sister who told me in December that she thinks she had COVID, and she lives in Arizona. And remember when they were saying how warm air and warm climates you wouldn't be affected by the disease, right? Because it kills after a certain temperature. She lives in Arizona in December, and even though December is still like their cooler months, she had it. She was like, I know I had it. This is December before they even told us anything. So once we started reflecting, I'm like, yeah, I had a really crazy cough and not all the time. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? You know, and you don't really think to go to the doctor for things like that because you're just like, well, I just, you know, drink some ginger tea and keep it moving. Right. But you realize like, we all probably had it, you know, like, and then I read, and this was a couple of months ago, but I read that Chicago had a different variation of COVID. So it's a different, we got a different strand out here. I'm like, this is masks, 2 layers, gloves, you know, hood. I have to scarf. Like, I'm like, you can't even tell them it's a person under all that stuff. So
on top of the brutal winter that Chicago has, you know.
Man, can you imagine? I'm not going anywhere.
Goodness, man. People don't realize, Sydney, that brutalness of that Midwest winter, like I said, Chicago, places like Chicago, Minnesota, you know, even, you know, Detroit, it gets real. Like,
we don't, you know, we got it easy compared to Minnesota. Like people say, oh, it's cold here. I'm like, wait till you go a little further up and see what I'm talking about. Like, it's not even fair. It's disrespectful.
Right.
It's disrespectful. It's disrespectful.
So disrespectful. Oh, goodness. Seriously.
Yeah. Man, you threw a lot out there. All right. A real quick question for those, because the first thing that popped into my head, then Cal, please jump in, chime in with another one. How do you do plays via Zoom? Like I've seen like people do like physical exercise. You got the computer set up. You got to stand in front of the computer. You got all these screens and stuff like that. Yeah. But like, how do you perform a play? Or how do you do that via Zoom? If you could just real quick.
Yeah. So I actually directed something for the Goodman Theater, and the Goodman Theater is like it's the largest regional theater in Chicago. So we did this thing back in July. And initially, I was supposed to direct 21 short plays written by men incarcerated in Stateville prison. But because of COVID, we shut it down. They shut the whole idea down, of course. And then, but we were still like, what can we do to draw attention to the fact that the men in Stateville and the women, you know, and children are the most vulnerable population. So we took 6 of those plays and decided to do them online. So we used the Zoom system. You know, they have a really great editor, and I recorded actors in their own homes, just sort of like doing the scene. But, you know, like, so right now we're sort of talking to the camera and kind of looking, you know, so I had them kind of like turning and looking in a certain way. So when you look at the camera, we'll look away from the camera and the other person's looking, it looks like they're talking to each other, even though they're technically in two different places. So that was some of the things that I did. But yesterday I saw this pretty phenomenal production, all recorded through Zoom. And the way that they did it was like the actors were all in their own individual spaces, but they took their, they had the virtual backgrounds to make it look like they were all in the same place.
Wow.
They did something video, like editing wise, like graphic design, where it looked like they were all in a bus because it was like the play was about school or whatever. It was just like really creative. Like people are getting really creative. The resistance I have to Zoom performances is that theater is a very communal space. We need to come together to breathe the same, to laugh the same, to gasp at the same thing, to react in different ways. And we can't do that in a computer setting. Like when I laughed last night, I had to type it in the chat. Like, I was like, this is so whack. Like, laugh. I want everybody to hear me laugh in this space because we all are collectively laughing together. So it was like one of those moments where I was just like, we're on mute a lot, and it's so symbolic. It's symbolic to the lives that we're in right now. It's so symbolic to everything. Black people are on mute. We can't say the things that we want to say. We can't push back on the establishment and the rules that the powers that be. We're in this little box. And I curse. Okay, can we in this little box? So I was about to say a word, but we're in this box, and the symbolic nature of this world we're in right now, I'm not really feeling. I was like, I love teaching. I actually love teaching little people because that's when you start. If you get them at that young age, then you can you'll see them grow into, different types of human beings that are prosperous and generous and thoughtful and loving and caring, feminist in the world. and I haven't been able to I physically see this. The first part of my pandemic, when we were back in March, I went through this really crazy roller coaster where I felt like, dang, I don't get a chance to hug them. I call it Hug Nation, because literally in our school promotes it. Some schools are like, don't touch the kid because we don't want to. I'm like, our class school was like, well, I mean, this is how we are. Kids hug each other. Kids hug teachers. This is what it is. And some kids don't want you to hug them, and you don't. Just like I don't want to be hugged all the time, but I'm like, ask me first, consent. So I miss that. I'm like, there's no human connection. Right. So doing plays in a Zoom world, I mean, I get it. I'm glad that people are working, because people are getting paid. But it's hard, it's hard to build that. And just to say something that I mentioned, I thought about after you said about what's happening in Chicago, a lot of artists are being furloughed. So if they're working at these big, huge theaters or, smaller theater, their jobs are furloughed. So even though they have a job, they're not getting paid. And that's why I say no one is doing enough to protect us. People want art, people want to use it, people see the necessity in it, but don't want to pay for it. It's unbelievable to me. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Sydney's talking some stuff, man. She's gonna get me to start asking her about 45, the president and all. She's getting political.
We're gonna.
I want to, but I'm gonna step back. Hey, Cal.
Yeah. No, it's funny. It's really. Well, I'm glad to hear that Sydney in reference of, because we're both educators. And like you said, there is that static. I call it like static. Like I've seen a few performances on Zoom, and what I was telling some of my friends were that, right, like you're not in the same space, so it's done very professionally. It's that movement. For me, it's that movement that I miss. It's like they're sitting down and they're acting it out, and great actors can act wherever, wherever. But it's just that movement is that some of the stuff that I miss.
Yeah.
Like you said, being around and moving amongst each other, because I mean, I've learned this kind of through you as well. Like that theater community is small, but it's also those nuances in theater that help to create that experience. Not just the speech and not just the people in themselves, but like how we move, how we share the same space, how we move in the same space, and how spaces are important as far as shaping characters and the scene. So it's like, wow, like I didn't notice that until this pandemic happened, but I missed that. Like I missed that part of it. So like, in reference to you teaching like the young people, there's one thing, because I follow, we follow each other on Facebook and whatnot. I love how you, with the young people, one, I love the hug part. That's great. That shows they have a strong community. What I love though is when you put up the conversations you have with them.
Oh yeah, schoolhouse dramas.
Yes.
Schoolhouse drama. See, I haven't done any schoolhouse drama, the virtual ones yet. I have them.
Yeah.
I just haven't put them up. But schoolhouse dramas actually started on Twitter, and I was when Twitter was first learning how to use it. I was like, well, these quotes are actually pretty funny. So I think somebody else would want to know about them. So I started that in like 2009. Surprising, like people don't believe that I started these such a long time ago. And I wish I would have still had like, I don't know if you can find your list of things that you've done on Twitter like you can on Facebook. Like Facebook gives you a whole database of like, what have you done? Like, here's all the stuff you've talked about and liked and shared and complained about. Here's a dossier on you right here. But in Twitter, I don't know if it works that way, but Twitter used to have this video function. I can't remember what it was called. I can't remember. It was like before, because Twitter didn't have its own video capabilities. They had this separate thing that you would have to like record and then add.
It sure did.
So that's how long it's been. So the fun thing about Schoolhouse Drama was that I ended up meeting Janelle Monáe as a result of doing these Schoolhouse Drama quotes. So the short story is I tweeted that I use her music in my class, and I use it as like a calming technique for the students to relax, and then we go into our lesson. And they would just do like little movements with their arms to the song, and it was kind of like a call and response with your body. And one day the students started singing the song. The song is called Neon Valley Street. It's one of my favorite songs that Janelle Monáe has ever created. So such a beautiful song, and her voice is so melodic and it's so angelic that it just calms you. So I started playing it, and then the students started singing all the words, and I didn't know they knew the words, but we had been playing the song for the whole year. So I was just like, I wonder if I should post this video of my students singing Neon Valley Streets. And this is before you couldn't post kids on Instagram.
Right.
So I posted, so they were like, please share it. So somebody that saw the post and I tagged, they were like, share the video. So then she watched it and she said, oh my God, this moved me. Oh my God, this is so beautiful. And I was like, oh my God, Janelle Monáe, Sarah, she loves her stuff. Like, all my students were all excited, like, what? She's gonna be our teacher now? Hello. I'm still here. Thanks. Appreciate you. So anyway, so after that, like probably a month after that, she sends a message on Twitter saying she's looking for me, but she didn't have my Twitter handle. And she's like, Sydney Chatman, I'm looking for you. Chicago teacher. I'm coming to Chicago. So and this was like close to the end of I think this was like a holiday. So I was like cleaning my classroom. The students were watching holiday videos, and I'm just kind of like doing my thing, trying to get organized. And then one of my friends was like, yo, Janelle Monáe is looking for you. I'm like, what? Okay, so let me go look for her. And I sent her a message, and she's like, oh, I already went to another school. Well, come to find out, she gave that organization some money. And I was like, oh my God, if she would have came to my school and saw the kids, we could have gotten some money. The theater department needs it because we don't have any money. So I was like, dang it. That was my little Twitter story. But yeah, schoolhouse dramas are like, they are just small anecdotes that I like to share about students and the things that they say. And I just think it's funny, but it's also lessons that I'm learning too. Some of the things that they say, I'm just like, how do you know that? Okay, let me write that down because that's pretty creative. And they're like, what do you do with those quotes? Oh, I share them. People read them. They're like, what they say? I'm like, they thought it was funny. Okay, get out of here. Off my shoulder, right? Like, so yeah, those schoolhouse drama. I'm actually turning those schoolhouse drama quotes into a book. Okay. And it's a book that talks about how to teach Black children. There aren't any, there are no teaching books that I've seen that focus on theater for Black kids. A lot of stuff that's like general, there's stuff like you learn about Shakespeare, you learn about all these other folks, but not a culturally specific book for Black children. So that's what I'm working on.
Nice, nice. Oh, see, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Make those moves because we need that literature out there. We definitely need that. And Janelle, Monet, if you're gonna listen to this podcast, yo, give this, go to the school, show your presence.
He probably was like, I don't want to talk to that woman no more because my students will say stuff like, "You look like her." Because I used to cut my hair. My hair was shorter than this, and it's like cool pompadour bob, you know, like this thing that I used to wear. And my students were like, "You look like her. You know, you look like Janelle Monáe." And I would post that, like, so she had known for a while that I had been like just posting things, and she was connected to it in a way. But yeah, I don't know. I don't look like this woman anymore. I don't know if she looks like herself anymore, to be honest. Right. Right. Money now, so money makes it look different.
Right. Right. Exactly. She changed so much. She's so talented. I mean, y'all both talented. I mean, that's real. But let me ask you this, Sydney. Like, so in reference, like you teaching with the youth, who are some of your inspirations? Like, cause you talked about it earlier, coming from Gary, Indiana, which is a special place, especially for Black folks, and of course, as we know, the Jacksons. You know. Mm-hmm. But like, who were or who are some of your inspirations, like in theater or like in the arts? I think in reference of us in general, we do talk about it, but I think we really don't understand like how one generation kind of begets another generation.
Yeah. Like, so, you know, I first have to shout out my mom because my mother loved theater. She loved musicals though. I'm not a fan of musicals. I really don't like them. I'll go see musicals if I have to. But I love telling social justice, you know, in your face, grimy stories. You know, I don't like that fluffy dance. I like dancing and I like singing, but I don't like them together in a theater place. That's
different.
But, you know, so when I think about like old school, you know, beginnings, my mother, of course, she was the one that was like, we got to watch this musical. And I was a ham when I was a kid. I was always the one making jokes and cracking people up and surprisingly, right, can you say? And then, but then like my first grade teacher, Miss Steele, she was she wasn't a theater teacher. She was my first grade teacher, but she loved music and she used to teach us music. And I used to love singing with her and, you know, and like doing the right thing. Like Miss Steele was hard. Like her name really, her reputation. But she was just like type of person that was like, she demanded excellence. So when I was thinking about like what type of teacher I wanted to be, because I honestly did not decide that I was going to teach. I did it as a after school thing, and the principal at the same school saw me teaching and was like, "You're really good at this. You should apply for the full-time job." And I was like, "I don't have a teaching degree." I went to school for theater. She was like, "No, but you're so good at it that you can use your expertise as a part of your transition into becoming a teacher." So so that's kind of how it started for me. So Miss Steele, and then when I went to high school, I had a gentleman by the name of Alger Boswell. Mr. Boswell taught theater, and he's no longer with us. Just want to rest in peace and raise his name and amplify him. But he was the first person that gave me a real role. He thought I was a really quiet kid. I was, you know, he thought I was super quiet. But I really wanted to do this role in the Colored Museum. The role was called Topsy Washington. And Topsy Washington is traditionally a man that plays that role dressed in drag. However, we weren't doing that version because we were from Indiana and he was not here for that. You know, the controversy of like, is that a boy? No.
That's the Midwest. You know,
so he wanted a girl to do it. And I really love the monologue because it just talks about invisibility and, you know, all those things that I felt like I felt in that time. And I was like, can you let me just do this? Can I just try it? You know, and he was like, come on, Chapman, go ahead. And I got up there and I killed it. And he was like, oh, that's your role. That's your part. And I was like, thank you. And there it is, you know. But it wasn't that I was interested in going to school for theater. I was going to school for dentistry. I was going to be a dentist. I was going to go, you know, have my own practice. And then I thought, oh, exercise science was something I wanted to do. And then theater was just like a humanities class I took for the sake of taking it. And then something clicked while I was in college. And I felt seen. I felt visible. I felt like I belonged here. So when I got to teaching, I wanted to make sure that I taught in that same way. That what I missed was a historical connection to theater. I would always ask, I was listen, when they talk about people being woke, I'm like, I was always like that. I was always that type of kid, the young adult that was always questioning and asking, why don't I see enough Black people in this space?
Mm-hmm.
So going to Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, which is the heart of the Klan,
yes,
you know, I was like, well, I'm gonna say what I want to say because I don't have any investment in this space, right? It's not mine.
right.
So I would shout out and complain, like, where are the Black women? Where are the Black teachers? Where's the Black theater? I know it exists and I don't see it. I don't see people that look like me. So they didn't want to teach it. So I would go to the library and I read tons of plays, tons of books and theory. August Wilson was a small little insect in our theater history book.
Wow.
He was a small little picture. And I was looking at that picture like, is this man even Black? Like, I couldn't even tell.
Wow.
The first time I ever saw him, I was like, I don't know who this man is, but I'm going to go read all his plays. And so up until that point, I had read everything that he had in the library. And I knew then I'm going to start a Black theater company in college, and we're going to do our own plays, and we're going to call it Black Feet. Not F-E-A-T, like your feet. Like our Black feet are in the space, walking on your space. Like, that was the idea behind it. It was a very revolutionary idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got to teaching, I was like, I want my theater experience for a child to be what I didn't have. Mm-hmm. I don't want to see, you know, I don't want kids watching The Sound of Music and then trying to insert themselves into that story. I want you to see stories that actually belong to you. And you do those stories. You write your own, create your own stories. Let's do it all together. So that's where my theory came from and how I was teaching. You know, they learned about I call Black theatrical heroes. And these heroes are, you know, people that they're standing on the shoulders of, from Ira Aldridge to Paul Robeson, to Catherine Dunham, to all these different people. Mm-hmm. So they learn about these greats as well as they learn about, you know, how to be a performer. But it's more of the theory, to be honest with you. Because a lot of parents think that their kids are fun or smart or whatever, like, you know, they're talented. I see him standing in front of everybody making us laugh. And I said, when he comes in here, he doesn't do that at all. You know? So it's like, so let's not push a kid into this industry. Let's teach them the appreciation for it. Okay. And maybe they'll be producers. Maybe they'll be the ones running these theater companies, changing the stories and changing the narratives. I don't imagine any of my students being artists. I really hope they don't. I really would rather you be the people behind the scenes, changing the things that are happening. So, so the Black theatrical heroes, or, you know, we learn about the different jobs in the theater. And this is like pre-K through 5th grade, keep in mind. Right. Because I know what's going to happen is that at some point, somebody's going to say, this is cool. I actually like this. I'm interested in pursuing this later.
Very good.
And it doesn't have to be the acting role. And I tell students all the time, you don't have to be an actor. But if you work in the behind the scenes, if you're working as a lighting designer and you're in the union, you know how much money you make in the union? There are very few, you know, grips, handles, whatever we call them, techies that are Black in the union. Yeah. So get that money. That's where the money is. So I push that. I'm like, yeah, anybody can be an actor. Anybody can. You know how to read, you know how to, like, you know, you have fluency, anybody can, but what it takes to go back to work the backstage, that's where the real money comes in. So that's my theory. That's my theater experience. That's how I teach.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. That's very important for you to say that, Sydney, because, you know, that's one thing, you know, she knows she's known me for a while, known my business partner Corey for a while, you know, so we have these talks amongst ourselves, and it's like the importance of being behind the camera. Like, everybody, they push being in front of the camera because that's what we see, but we don't see, quote unquote, see us behind the camera, you know, setting up the stages, doing the camera work, doing the lighting, doing the electricians, all that. So it's like, that's where we can really create like real change, to create spaces for people who really want to be and need to be artists. So yeah, that's very important. Yeah, definitely. And definitely at that young age too, for them to be able to see that through you and other people, that's possible.
Yeah, you know, and I learned how to do that. You know, no one taught me how to teach kids. I didn't go to school for teaching. I mean, I was trying to do all types of stuff in college, but I knew after I started taking the theater courses more serious, that actually this is where I believe I'm supposed to be. You know, making the decision to follow your heart opposed to following the money is really important when you're thinking about artistic practices, because unless you are the one that has the name, the highest name on the list, you know, you're not going to make that kind of money. But it is about taking care of yourself, financial stability, but it's also about following your heart and believing that what you do is important and has value. So that's what I teach my students. You know, they can tell you that they're like, I don't have any desire to be an actor. And then you find out like, oh, case in point, I have a former student who's in his I think he turned 30. He's in Atlanta pursuing acting. Had no clue that this student of mine is now an actor. But then I go to his Twitter page, his Facebook. I'm like, this kid's been on some stuff. Like, that's what's up. You know, out of the thousands of kids that I've taught over the years, you know, 1 or 2 are going to slip through, and you're going to find them like taking it serious. So that's really impactful. And sometimes my theater teaching impacts young people in different ways. In short story, I have a former student who she has her master's in public relations, I believe, or writing or something. And she was working for Ebony before Ebony defunct. And she was working as an assistant to the editor. Okay. She was also writing articles about, you know, fashion and beauty and all the kind of things. And she ended up writing for a magazine like Elle or something. And she talks about me in the article because she was saying how I taught them about minstrel shows and stuff, how theater was created. She held on to that information as an eighth grader, and now she's a full adult with a master's, and she remembered the things that I taught her. And I was just like, I'm in a magazine. Pretty dope. Like it had, you know, like it's just this connection that she built around what she learned, and I'm just the theater teacher. You know what I'm saying? Like real talk. I'm just the theater teacher. So I just feel like people like us have impact and value that I think a lot of schools don't see the value of people like me, because it's not something that's pursuing math or science or, you know, or reading or writing in a way that they feel is going to have you pass this, you know, standardized test. But that's why this whole pandemic is where we are. What were people doing? They were watching Netflix, you know, they were, it was all entertainment. It was like, well, what do I do to pass the time away? You know, we had to do physical challenges where we were like doing push-ups and stuff, like trying to find ways to engage our body and our spirit, because we were so confused about what was happening. There was a lot of fear, you know, a lot of distrust, a lot of anger. So what do you lean on? You lean on music. You lean on something that comforts you, and that's art. It is. You know, I have value. Shoot, I don't know if people need to get with this artistic programming and put me in something. You know, find some place to put me so I can work.
Sid. There was now that you speak on that, there was a meme that was going around like early in the pandemic, like March, April, whatever, that I saw like on Instagram and whatnot. It says like, don't forget that you went to the arts to help get you through the pandemic.
Right.
Meme going on around.
That's right.
Yeah, and people go to that. And I think like what you're saying and what we've all been saying, like as people who really know what's going on, is like, yeah, we can push the science, the technology, the engineering, and the math, but instead of STEM, let it be STEAM. You know, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. You know, arts gets, in this country, in America, I really feel arts, no matter who's coming from, it really gets crapped on. Like they don't really put it up to a higher caliber as other professions. And like you said, these are the things that we go to, but it's the value.
But you know, there's other part that people don't realize is that you do need math and science and all that to create the art. So it's all intertwined. I'm a scientific director. I'm a scientific writer. I don't just write, okay, I have this plan, I'm just going to write these things. I'm very scientific about it, even down to the way I direct, you know, productions, you know. So can I explain how that works? No, sometimes it's just a matter of, you know, meditating in a chair. I'm literally sitting there and I'm somewhere else, you know, and then I'm writing and sketching and coming up with ideas, or I'm reading something as a reference, and then I can create from that reference, or, you know, listening to something, or, you know, it's just like, a lot of it I feel like is meditation. You know, a lot of it comes from ancestral practices, because sometimes I don't know where, I'm like, I wrote that? That actually sounds good. And then some of that stuff is crap. You like, I didn't write that. No, somebody else wrote that. So you kind of like, you know, you put it away, but I don't take it personal. I feel like I used to take it personal. I used to be like, okay, here I am, just the prep provider coming in to relieve a teacher of their prep so they can do the big work. But who will the student remember? 9 times out of 10, they're gonna remember that person that they had a lot of fun with. Remember when we did? You know, think about it. Your music teacher, your gym teacher, your art teacher, those are the folks people remember. The teachers too, but those other teachers had to do something really dynamic for you to say, I remember that teacher, you know? So
I think they say it's the memory pretty much that you remember, not what actually taught, but it's how that person made you feel. It's the lasting impression that person has. A couple of things you threw out there. Oh my goodness, Sydney. So one of the things that I want to emphasize on, and which is what you follow and Cal and I talk about, is my organization's mission is inherent skill set, meaning what you do naturally, right? What you gravitate to naturally is what you'll be a success in. So when you mentioned with regards to behind the scenes, the grips and the sounds and things of that nature, when a young person that you teach, particularly when you can get them to identify what they do naturally, especially not what's pushed in their face, because all that the media is doing, all that the system is doing is trying to teach you, to be famous or to have a life fulfilled is to be that next LeBron James or that next famous actor, or the case would be. Not realizing it's the people who are behind the scenes who control what's really going on. So I'm very proud and inspired to hear you say that. That's one. To get to ask this question for you, with all the challenges that you experienced, John Monet, who, you know, didn't get the funding to you, you could have used the money and stuff like that, and everything else with how society treats people like you who are very valuable, and how they just push aside because arts isn't highlighted. What is something that helps you rise to be your best every day, despite all these challenges and setbacks and opposition?
That's a good question. So I'm not gonna lie to you. There are days, like I said, the gloom and the doom will just cover me, because I'm an empath. I take in all the different things that are happening around me. What inspires me? So I'll say, in terms of my artistic practice, what inspires me is knowing that I'm creating work that is going to heal and support a community of Black women and girls. Something I didn't mention in my bio is that my focus, even though I'm working with all types of children and genders, my focus for my own personal practice is working with Black women and girls. And it uplifts me, it gives me, and I'm inspired working with this group of people, because what we miss in the theater is stories that are authentically connected to people like us. You know, theater has been and always have been a white-centered, cis male environment. So just being in the theater is the resistance. Being in that space, you know, down those misconceptions already. But I feel like, because I didn't know, you know, my mother and my father didn't know like what to do with theater. They didn't have any clue about how theater works. They were just like, if you like it, love it. Not at the beginning. You know, my mother was like, get something else in case, you know, like, in case.
Yeah.
But when I think about like what I would have wanted, I'm always like, okay, what do I want? What did I want as a person coming up, or a young person coming up into this business and becoming an adult? Let me pour that into someone else. I'm inspired by working with young people and their families that want to tell their authentic stories. So that gets me up, you know, being able to talk to former students and hear about their journey artistically has motivated me. You know, I was like, literally looking at the walls the other day, and just so happened that a former student calls me and was like, hey, I was just thinking about you. I'm like, wow. You know, is that cool? Like, these are my children. You know, I don't claim my students as children. They are their own people, but I look to them as my artistic children. These are the ones that I've sort of birthed into the world, and they're doing their thing. So that's what inspires me. That's what gets me up. You know, that's what makes me feel really proud to be a teacher and an educator and an artist, a community-based artist. What also motivates me is to see my plants. Like, I have a whole, behind this camera, there's like a whole family of plants back there, and they're growing. And I'm like, ooh, this is my grandmother, you know, this is my grandmother's green thumb that I think I've inherited. So I'm very happy about that. So
nice. Nice. Yeah, that is awesome. That is awesome. And that's interesting too. Like, you know, our parents, especially with the arts, are like, you know, baby, you know, make sure you get some 9 to 5, pay the bills, you know, can't live off that art. You know, it's like that kind of protection. I want to protect you. You know, it's just funny, like how I hear that from a lot of different parents. Most parents are people who are artists. It's like, now, baby, like, I know that's your dream, but, you know, go get that degree. You know, it's that thing. Yeah. It's just interesting. And it's
you know, I don't even think my mother realized that I was any good until she saw a play, and she was like, oh, wow, like, I'm moved by this. I'm like, oh, all right, now, don't down the kid. Yeah. Don't tab me out. But, you know, that's also part of their job, right? Their job is to protect you. So if they don't know how to do, you know, something like that, because they never pursued it, then they can't really share that with their children. And I think that's where educators are so important, because a lot of times the young people that are coming to you, you know, like you all have older students, they're trying to figure it out too. You know, their family may not have experienced the same type of education that they're experiencing. So having someone that knows, has been there, that can say, you can do this, it's possible. You know, we see what we know. We see what we become. That's what I'm trying to say. You know, like, that's what I like about, I mean, I have to just point out my lovely background.
I was going to do that. That was
why I love this background, because when I had the graphic designer make it, I really wanted Bessie Coleman and Mae Jemison, and I got her on my pen right here, in this world with these girls who are thinking about aviation the same way. So, and this is you probably can't see it, but that's the second and third girls are my nieces. Wow. So, like, it was like a family affair. You know, they were about 8 and 9 at the time, so they fit right in with the rest of the girls that were in the program. And they came to visit, and it was like, hey, we're gonna do this as a family. So you know, that's why I feel like it's important to have these images, to remind ourselves of our history, to remind ourselves of people who came before us, because it just inspires us in very different ways. You know, you're saying about the people that inspired me to teach, or the type of work, I think it was August Wilson, in a sense, because I'm like, I didn't know anything about him. And I was, you know, I was like big into women's history and feminism in college. And I wanted to read more stories about women. So I went into that library looking for those types of stories and that type of work. And then to actually have a full circle moment where I met August Wilson in 2003. I worked on a play with him in Chicago, was just like, and I had to tell him that story. I was like, you would not believe that you were in a history book, and I was mad because I didn't know who you were before I went to college. I'm 18, and the first time I see a book about you, you know, I'm 18 years old. Like, that's not fair. And do you know what he said, which I thought was so humbling of him? He said, was Lloyd Richards in the book? And Lloyd Richards was a theater director. He used to teach at Yale. He was there. He was the Yale theater director of the department.
Okay.
Wow.
And he used to direct a lot of August Wilson's plays. And he didn't say, oh, that's so nice that I was in the book. He asked me, was Lloyd Richards in it? Was his friend in the book? Not me. I didn't need to be in the book. I was like, what? That was just
humble.
I mean, after that, I was just like, I love this guy. He's everything. So
wow, that's a legend right there. Family, y'all gotta realize, like, that's one of my favorite playwrights. I mean, to create a story for each decade, that for me is just amazing. Like,
listen, and do you know that they're doing Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, right? For Netflix.
Yes. And Chadwick Boseman's in there, right?
Speaking of Chad, yes.
Yeah, you know I got
Speaking of, like, look, okay, when I tell you that my life is dope, like, people don't realize that I actually have been around and I've done some really dope things. But Chadwick Boseman worked for, was an ensemble member, or I guess artistic associate with Congo Square Theater. And Congo Square Theater is here in Chicago. August Wilson deemed Congo Square Theater, which was a small theater at the time, one of his favorite theaters. So I meet August Wilson, work with him on his play, his second to last play, which was called Gem of the Ocean. Okay. And then a year or two later, Chadwick Boseman comes into Chicago, and he brought his play to Congo Square Theater. So I met him and ended up inviting him to come to my school. So the boys in my middle school met Chadwick Boseman, and he spent like the whole day with us. It wasn't even something planned. It was just like, hey, I want you to come. Could you come talk to us? Come hang out. He was like, yeah, I'll come. So he came. He did some improv. He taught the students improv. He talked about their purpose. Why are they here? It was dope. And I'm mad at myself because I didn't get a picture. I was like, what was I doing? Like, I'm taking the picture. Why didn't I get in the picture? But I still remember that moment as being like so impactful, you know, like one of those things. And then here, 2020 took him away from us, and I was devastated because I'm like, come on. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, but, you know, big ups to Chadwick and August for being two very kind souls who really believed in loved Black people. Loved us, was not afraid to say that they love Black people. You know, some people are saying people of color. Right. And replacing that with Black, like, no, they were like, I love y'all. We're going to get through this. We're going to be in this together. So.
Is that what, I'm sorry, Kyle, I just got to throw this in. Like, sometimes, I forgot to tell you this, Sydney, that I shoot from the hip with my questions sometimes. Is that probably subconsciously a part of you that gave you that courage to speak out in Indiana in regards to there's no Black presence in this college? I'm going to bring Black presence here. I don't see any theaters here. I don't see any, you know, despite the concern and fear that many have for their lives for speaking up on Black issues and Black presence. Was part of that love for Black people what inspired you and gave you that courage to speak out in an environment that's so saturated in other cultures, such as, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think also I grew up like that. You know, we grew up in Gary, Indiana, which is 30 minutes from Chicago. It's very close. A lot of people think that it's far away, but it's close. But then Northwest Indiana is completely different than the southern and central part of Indiana.
Yes.
We literally, like, when I was a kid, the Bears, the Bulls, those were our teams. We were not Hoosiers. I never claimed to be because I never lived close enough to whatever they like. What y'all talking about? We up here, you know, we could get on the train and come to Chicago in 30 minutes. So that was my world. So being in this space where, you know, your identity or your Blackness was always supported in my family. I was around us all the time, even in our schools, you know, learning about the Black National Anthem and like singing that as opposed to singing, you know, saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Like that was our thing. That was our school. Black teachers. I saw those memes like go around where people say, when was the first time you had a Black teacher? And people say stuff like, well, I've never had one, or I had one when I was in 8th grade. I'm like, I've always had a Black teacher and a male teacher at that. So I was like, that was probably who I was. Like, I was always like that kid. And then I go to college and I'm looking around like, this isn't what I thought college was supposed to be, you know? And became very frustrated that I wasn't getting what I needed to feel included, you know? So that's what I did. I hope more people do that. More people should stand up for that.
I agree.
I think that's what's happening to a large degree now with the Black Lives Matter movement, with We Buy Black. I think there's a conscious construct that's being developed now because, like they say, a leader will rise when the people are ready. I think that's what we're facing right now, that we're tired of it. You know, we're frustrated, you know, and I think that's what's going to end up happening going forward in the future? I'm sorry,
No, I don't think that it ever left. I just think it went a little dormant because we got complacent. Okay. We were able to go and live in another place. We were able to buy it at a different store. You know, they broke up those communities for that reason. Mm-hmm. We have buying power. We have staying power. People don't know that. So I think that when integration happened, that really was the fall of community, in my opinion. That once we had integration, we can go anywhere we wanted to go. Then our money wasn't centered in the neighborhoods that we were living in. It was spread out, you know, and we can't protect something. You can't protect a neighborhood when you don't have any ownership in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
So now we got to get people to get that mindset, you know, like you got to figure that out. Like there's so many apartments and so many of these, but you can still do something to make an impact in your neighborhood, even if you don't have any sense of, you know, buying power, ownership.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kyle and I'll talk about this as a matter of fact, in regards to bringing everyone back together, whereas people get in the book Powernomics by Dr. George Anderson, Claude Anderson, where he talks about we live in neighborhoods, we don't live in communities, and people don't realize the difference. You know what I mean? You have to own the political stock, the stores, you know, everything in that community. So to your point, yeah, very good. I think hopefully we're coming around to that rebranding or reprogramming on my mind. Sorry, Kyle.
Yeah. No, not at all, brother. I mean, I think that ties into what I was going to get into because, you know, Sydney living in Chicago, we talked about it with our past guest, Miss Irene Smalls. And, you know, Sydney, you living in Chicago and being from Indiana, you know, that close proximity, like that, like you said, that history, that pride and community and culture. And I wanted you to kind of speak on that too. You've spoken on it throughout the program, but like really speaking on like why Chicago and certain communities are the way they are and why the children, because, you know, a lot of times Chicago is a bad rap. Even some of my students are like, you know, yo, you from Chirac? I'm like, no, I'm not from Chicago. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I live originally from the South, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, no, Chicago is a community. It's not as bad as it's portrayed, but it's not as good as you think it should be. You know what I'm saying? I just want you to speak on that because, you know, you around I call you activist. Even though you're educated, you're a producer, you're a writer, I still call you an activist because you're doing the work. And could you speak on that for people to kind of give them
so in terms of Chicago is very complicated. The city has always had some sort of, we had in the 1900s, we had the race riot, the 1919s, and that really set the tone for the division that Chicago has. So Chicago is made up of complete neighborhoods. Like everybody is in their own pods, their own silos. Black people are either regulated to the south or the west side. White folks on the north. You know, there's a Chinatown, which is different from, you know, Devon Street, which is where most Indian people live, et cetera. So then they're like immigrants. Most of the immigrants live north, but even on the north side in those certain pockets, there's like, you know, there's a neighborhood for Africans. There's a neighborhood for Caribbean. It's not like New York where you can be walking next to somebody. It's a race thing here. It's not a class thing. It's a race and class thing here. Where in New York, to me, it feels more class based. How much money you have, where you fit. I could be wrong, but in Chicago, it's really based on the separation is based on race, and then there's a level of class on top of that.
Yeah.
So when I hear people say that they call it Chirac, you got to think about the displacement and the way they put people in the neighborhoods in Chicago, building the towers of, you know, public housing where people were forced to move into. And then once those were collapsed and they were dismantled, then they kind of shift people around to put them in different places. Well, if we all were one type of people in this particular tower, now you separate us. Well, what happens now? So now I'm living next to somebody that I had some beef with, you know, in the historically. But let's even talk about that. Why do we have those types of historical, you know, communities? Because I'm not going to call them what you want me to call them. Right. But a lot of that was because we were tired of the police coming into our neighborhoods and beating us up and harassing us. So we formed our own form of protection. And then that was dismantled. right? So the men and women who created protection for us are in, prisons where they can't communicate to other people.
Black Panther.
So we think about things like that, like, Chicago is a very political city. And we have what are called aldermen. I don't know if you all have aldermen in New York, but the aldermen
they don't have aldermen.
Okay.
Like
they run the neighborhoods, and each neighborhood. So even though you got all this separation of different people, each neighborhood is then divided into a section that one person is sort of like has constituents, and that person is an alderman, and that alderman is in charge of making sure that all of the things are functioning properly, from garbage pickup to water issues to violence to all those things. When the city decides to distribute funds and money, they call them TIF funds. Those TIF funds are supposed to go to underserved communities, the communities that were initially booming, but then the money was taken out. And what we find in Chicago is that a lot of people, a lot of our communities on the South and West Side were disinvested because they're the closest to the center of everything. So if you want to get rid of Black folks, what do? You just stop putting money into their communities. You just say, okay, well, we don't have money to give you for school, so we got to close the school down. So what happens if my kid can't go to a school in the neighborhood? Now that kid has to go somewhere else. Okay, so then now that kid is going to another neighborhood that they don't know, being bused somewhere else, and that neighborhood has a history of this type of community. Y'all follow where I'm going?
Yeah.
Yes.
So people are shifted around, right? The resources are taken out. People are shifted. People are frustrated. I don't like that person. So that's where you get the lack of communication, because that's what I really think it comes down to. We don't communicate with each other anyway because we don't know who that person is. We don't want to talk to that person. It's cold outside. It's like the weather changes your personality and your attitude. It snows. I'm not shoveling the snow for this person. I'm parking my car right here and I'm putting this huge toilet in the middle so nobody else can park here.
Chair.
It's called dibs, So like I'm being funny, but I'm like, that's what happened, So we started the neighborhood that I want to put my space in, my theater space in, and more of I don't even call it a theater anymore. It's more of a community space that happens to have a theater. But I want to put it in Bronzeville because Bronzeville is where a lot of Black people were put and moved. They were forced to live in one area in the 1900s during the Great Migration. They couldn't go anywhere else. And then once it became too much and people were sitting on top of each other and it was just way too many people, then they started opening up the boundaries just a bit. But there's so many different things that happen in Chicago, from redlining, where if you you couldn't live in a certain place of the city, restrictive covenants, predatory loans, where you get a loan and you don't realize that you're gonna have to pay for this for the rest of your life, or they can take your house if you don't pay a bill, make a payment. So there are all these different factors that weigh into the frustration, the lack of resources, the lack of education that people have in the city. So then you have, what do people result to? They result to trying to figure it out. I love that quote that Tupac used. I can't find it online, but Tupac had this quote where he said, first when we were rapping, we used to talk about one thing, and then we talk about the window, then we looking out the window. Now we opening up the window. Now we're going in, because it's like before we had these things, so we didn't have to rap about those things. And it's the same way in Chicago. Before, when we did have these resources, you didn't have the types of problems that you have now. All of these folks are all really what you believe. They probably all are cousins. They don't even know it, because we done mixed around and been all shuffled and shuffled to another part of the city. And it's a lack of trust and communication. I think that's the biggest thing in our community, is that we don't trust each other and we don't communicate to each other about how we feel. So what do we do? Well, I mean, this whole country is based on violence. So what do you expect people to do in situations like this? That's the answer to that.
And I appreciate you that out for us. again, I try to, add some insight where I can, but you're there, you're in the thick of things. And again, it's just, the city has definitely its negatives about it, but also has its positive if we can just kind of rally around those things that will make us be our better selves, and really get back to what really matters, whether it be like financially, economically, even mentally, really start to rally around. And again, people doing work like yourself. We interviewed Andre Daniels @2. He's doing that work, and countless other people. Kyrie, I want to go into another. I'm going to go. So like you saying, with the work that you do with Black girls, like the Black Girls Can Fly, I can see that behind you. I want to talk about in reference of discrimination in the arts too. I want to go into that because not just with Black girls and Black women, but just Black folks in general. And I want you to see if you could speak on, I guess, ways to kind of counteract that, because I know a lot of young people maybe want to get into the arts, and especially what's going on now. Everybody, like you said, is so-called woke, but it's like, okay, well, what about the images that Black girls and Black boys are seeing about Black girls and about Black boys? And how can we kind of combat that or just navigate around it? Really?
Yeah. So there's this movement and I believe it's national, but it started with a small group of artists called We See You White American Theater. And they've been calling out American theaters who have harmed Black people and people of color. And that's why I have to bring up, I teeter the line between solo work and working in the industry and then working as an educator, because I think those are three different things that happen in my life. And I'm very choosy and I'm very picky about, I don't like picky, I'm very discriminatory when it comes to the work that I do, because I don't want to be in a space where I don't feel supported and wanted and loved. And the reason why I push for Black theater as its purpose, because it has its purpose of bringing all of those types of folks who are Black in Black communities together. The more specific the story, the more universal the message. So when I worked in the theater, that's what I was more focused on. Can I work with other Black people who look like me and we tell compelling stories? So there's a twofold thing with me. I understand what people have gone through. I've actually experienced several encounters with discrimination and sort of putting me in my place as the director. I'm the director, right? And I'm still being put in my place from a white woman, white people, and I'm like, this is why I don't like working with y'all, because I don't like being in a space where I can't say whatever I want to say. And I typically do. So to counter that discrimination, to counter those types of things, that's why it's so important that we do create our own. That's why it's so important that we support people who are doing their own, because that's how they thrive. I think sometimes we feel like support should just happen because I'm Black. No, you got to do a little bit of work though. Right. You have to want to be in a space where you want to have people to work with you. Am I saying that right? You have to want people to want to be around you, if that makes any sense.
Yes, it does. Yes.
Just say, I'm Black, I have a business, I'm Black, I'm an artist, I'm Black, and I'm this. People should just support me because I'm Black. No. Because your practices could be.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just saying, I don't know where we get that idea from, especially living in the country with the history that we have, talking about you Black and you have some kind of entitlement. I mean, we've never had entitlement in this culture. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just saying.
No, I mean, that's how I see it. So when you counteract that discrimination, that is creating your own, but then finding the resources to help support the vision that you want. What's interesting though is that there are people who say, well, we should be able to be in those spaces. Well, those white spaces did not exist until someone put the money and investment into those spaces. The board controls a lot of these theaters. The board controls a lot of these organizations, and the boards are made up of people who have money. So if you really want your board or your company or organization to be just as flourishing, just as grand and, around for longevity and years to come, then you have to find the people that's going to be able to support you in that way. But that doesn't come without building community.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's me walking up to somebody who's, you know, they say that Chicago has one of the largest populations of millionaires, Black millionaires.
Oh, wow.
I haven't met them all, but I have met some. And I'm like, just a regular person, you know. I think the other part of it is like access too.
Mm-hmm.
People who are in those you know, white institutions, and just using them as the you know, like separating white institutions from the other, just to make a point.
Mm-hmm.
But there are Black people in these white institutions that have gotten to pretty high levels that never pulled anybody else up with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's problematic.
Mm-hmm.
It is problematic.
You know, so when we think about the stories that what can young people do? Well, some of these young people are working in school, going to schools with people who don't look like them. Well, you know, use what you know, use the folks that you have in your circle to find ways to support your community. But if we don't teach that, if we don't say like, you are living in this space, you are working in this space because this is where we are able to afford and take care, we're able to take care of you. We want you to have a good education. If your parents or your people are not saying, but you Black and you need to love your people, and when you get to where you going, then you bring those people, then that's why we have this disconnect. You know, that's why the stories are not told the way we should see the stories told.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't have people in those spaces with a sense of consciousness to say, this isn't right or this is wrong. You know, so when you say like, because you gave me two things, you said something about the countering the discrimination, but then also about young people and the stories. I was trying to answer that too.
Yeah. It's in reference of like, right, the discrimination, but also like those images that we see.
Right.
Counterbalance those images. And, you know, a lot of times, because a lot, especially with our youth and just in general, we see the images of violence or sexualized of our bodies. You know, this is a conversation I had to talk about, like just with our bodies, right? Like how does someone start to begin to combat that? Because, you know, we get started with it, you know, just overall, I mean, American itself is hypersexual, but
right.
Overall, like with us, particularly with Black folk. You
know, I'm trying to make sense of all of the changes that have been happening in the world. I'm old school sometimes, but I'm also trying to make sense of why we choose to see these types of images. You know, why do we see these images, and why are they being portrayed? Why are they being so overly saturated in our social media? You know, like there's an example of a student in 5th grade a couple of years ago. And this student was on social media, on the social sites, twerking. And all the kids found out and was just like, she was talking about it. And she was embarrassed. You know, she felt shame for doing this. Now, you know, my old school self was like, you know, you shouldn't be out there, you know. But then the other part of me was like, but why is she doing that? You know, what does she need to, what does she need? What validation does she need to feel? You know, she was even though she's in the 5th grade, she was a shapely girl, and the boys are noticing a shapely girl compared to, you know, somebody else. And that stuff runs in your head. It's like, we can't control everything that kids are going to see, but we have to be the ones who tell them, what is the counter message? I don't know. You know, I think a lot of it has to do with communication and talking and mentoring and building up a group, like, you know, really fostering a group of people to allow them to express themselves. And maybe if there's a sense of worth, but as a whole, I don't think that Black people know their worth as a whole.
I agree.
That may be a very generalization, but as a whole, I don't even know how much, if we realize that. So that's why it's so many different degrees of how we should handle things. You know, I can't say that a girl should not be twerking in the 5th grade. I don't know what she needs.
Very good.
You know, I'm not a parent either. I do have my personal opinions about it, but I think sometimes what we get locked in is like, this was a conservative view of how life is from back in the day. But you know, those people was twerking too, like they weren't just out here, you know.
It went on social media.
Like when we heard WAP, what do we hear? Like people were like, "Oh my, clutching my cows, oh my gods," and I'm like, listen to all this blues from the 1930s, and then you're gonna really be clutching your pearls because you're not gonna know what to do. The fact that these folks are saying the stuff they're saying, so, that's why I feel like it's more.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying, Sydney. They were doing it in the juke joints. It wasn't on social media. You know what I'm saying?
Right, but they also put it on wax too. So somebody produced it. Somebody shared that information. They shared that stuff. And I think you're right though that you're right, because there was a separation between adults and children. And if the adult bought the record, that kid was not sitting there listening to it either. Right. Go in your back room and close the door, and I'm gonna be up here with your daddy.
Yep.
This is what we are. So I do agree. I agree with you on that. But why is it such an exploitation of it? My real opinion is that it's like, if we can distract us from what's really important, using the body as a distraction, using music as a distraction, then we aren't going to pay attention to what's really happening on behind the scenes. The fact that, and this is not on topic, but the fact that they confirmed Amy Coney Barrett, the woman who's now in the Supreme Court. Yep. I think I said her name right. I'm trying to make sure that I say these, demons right, because name in order to cast the spell. No, I'm kidding. But you gotta say, but the fact that they were able to do that so slyly, think about when Obama was president. They were calling him out because he was trying to confirm somebody before he got out of office. Yeah. And they still let him do it. That's that kind of stuff. Like, okay, let's distract you with all these other things so that when we really do stuff that's going to change the course of this country, y'all don't even know about it.
Right.
And I think the kids get caught up in it because a lot of times we've done away with respectability. We've done away with you can't say that that's wrong for somebody to do that because that's respectability politics. You can't tell me that my kid can't wear this thing. I'm the mother, I'm the father. They can do whatever, So we grow up, we're in a different time period. So we got to figure out how to navigate where we are and not try to impose our, sensibilities, our personal sensibilities on where we are, and find a way to reach young people where they are. And maybe by example, by showing by example that these are the things that you're interested in or you're involved in, or this is how you were, and creating that trust that a young person will then take some of that as advice, but listening to them and talking to them is the most important part of all of this.
Yes, it is.
We don't listen enough. We dismiss. We say, I had a situation where we were talking about our emotions on our Zoom, and I didn't know that the parent was in the room with the student, and this is in 5th grade. And I said, has anyone ever felt that way before? Like a parent, not listening to them or dismissing them when they were trying to talk to them. And then this kid is like, yeah, my mom did that to me. And I heard his mother say, no, I didn't. I was like, okay, next question. I was like, but really, right? Like, you're saying that you didn't, but he said that you did. Like, there's something to be said about that you didn't give your son the benefit of the doubt. You just dismissed it without listening. Right. Because in the listening, then you could have probably figured out like, oh, he was really trying to talk to me about something. This the parents are picking up their phones like the kids are. Yep. Yeah. Like, don't be mad at them because they're not listening to you, because you're not listening to them.
And that's where they get it from.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly where they get it from. It's wow, Sydney. Wow, real because I just saw it. Chris Rock just did an interview I just saw the other day, right? And he said something that was really interesting to me. Again, he's older than us, but just how different parenting is now and how we function in society with parents and children. Because we came up in an era where it was that major separation, like, adults over here, children over here, like don't mix, right? So he was saying that like when he was coming up, parenthood for him was like just to be present was like half of parenthood, like 50%. And he said in today's time, now that's like 30%.
That's right.
add the other stuff onto it. You gotta really listen. You gotta really be attentive, to the emotional development of your child. So I was like, damn, that's interesting, right? Like how that dynamic changed. It was like, wow, 50% before it was like, okay, I'm just there. I got half of this parenting thing down locked. Oh yeah, you upset, you mad, boy, get over it. Like, go on somewhere. Now it's like he says, like 20-30%. Just being there is just 20-30%. Now you got to handle the other 80, 70-80%, of it, dealing with like what you just said, like listening, like really like, you ain't got to be like just all in their ear, just all up under them, but just kind of like, hey, this, like you said, and you've said it throughout the interview. I don't think people called it young person.
Mm-hmm.
A young person. They are children, but it's like, remember, this is a little person, what I'm saying? Soon be an adult, like,
right.
And I think that term when you said words have power and meaning,
Awesome. All right, we're closing out. So I got a final question.
And I got one final question too.
One final question, and then we want to hear your last words. What advice you want to give, any possible solutions to where we at. So the final question, and Cal's gonna give his final question, is where do you see your art form going, Sydney?
I see it being more global. I'm not interested in these small little things that people are doing. Like the whole, like, I like little things people do. Like the whole, like, the people that are doing this, we see you, they're trying to acknowledge the fact that they want the theaters to acknowledge that they have done some harm. I think that's very important.
Ooh.
I do not want to own and operate a white institution. I want my own. So where I see my art practice going is that I will have a building, and this building will be a space that it doesn't just incorporate a theater, because I feel like theater spaces are a waste of real estate.
Oh, wow.
Think about this. All those theaters down on Broadway in New York, like you can't use them for community spaces. You can't have sessions where you meet for people there. You can't have there's no coffee shops inside. Like it's just specifically for the purpose of going in and going out. It's not a space where you can kind of move and gain something from. So the space that I want to create will be that type of space. It won't just be just a theater though. It'll be a community healing space. So there will be yoga. There will be a therapist on duty. There will be a place where you can learn how to grow your own food. There will be plants. There will be meditations. And it will just be the dopest thing in Chicago and in Indiana, because I'm gonna do two. And then we're gonna be able to bring folks in. So that's what's next for me.
Ooh. Okay. Yeah, that's
franchising.
Yeah, man.
So when you find some investors that want to talk, please send them my way. I'm like, this is a big thing, but I feel that we have to give back to we have to get back to the spirit. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many people were all over the place when it came to the pandemic, because it was like, well, let me just try to do all this grind and work without thinking about, you got to stop and slow down for a second. So the space that I want to create is that stop and slow down. You can have some tea, you can read a book, and it's not about buying the book so that you can then, unless you want to, but it's a library. Read the plays that you want to read, or read the intellectual thoughts, centering children in the process of that. We need more kids in spaces where we think the kids don't belong. Not in juke joints, though. I think that I draw the line.
Right. They can be juking, like in Chicago, they can do the juke. Right. Oh, man. They can get it on in the
collar up.
It was like, yes. Yeah, we're gonna provide a video film so you know what we're talking about. It's fly. It's fly. It's different, but it's fly. Real. But yeah, okay. So my last question, Sydney, what can an artist, just kind of like maybe one or two things that an artist can do politically in this political climate to help affect like positive change?
Ooh, politically.
Would it be locally, presidential,
Yeah, one, I think it may be hard to do, but say hello to your neighbors. I said hello to my neighbor yesterday and helped her get her bags out the car, and we bonded and she just shared so much information. She had been 5 generations on the block. Like, what?
Wow.
I just met someone who had been here all this time I had never met before.
Wow.
Artistically, I would say if you are in a position of power, then bring someone with you. And it shouldn't just be the people that are in your inner circle. You know, think about folks that are aligned to your beliefs and bring them with you. Share the platform, share the table with them.
Enzo was talking about that the last interview we had with his platform, Kyle. He was talking about bringing people. He wants to open up a platform, bring people. The question that I have with you, Sydney, is you said speak to your neighbors. Is that geographical? Like, I mean, there's some, you know, you talk to, you know, so
that's how New Yorkers out there.
All right, so okay. Because I'm just saying, some people they might try it and end up, you know. I'm just saying.
I mean, a quick good morning doesn't. I mean, that doesn't hurt anybody. And if they don't respond back, you just say, okay.
There you go.
Hey, you know, like, I mean, because it's really shocking to have somebody say hello to you for anywhere, you know, any place, because you always think the worst. You think that somebody's trying to get something from you. But, you know, I say speak because you never know. If I'm trying to build something on this, because I moved during this pandemic, I had to move. So I don't know this neighborhood. I know Bronzeville. I know the people over there. I don't know Washington Park. So I was like really nervous. Like, I'm scared. And I'm like, why am I scared? I'm scared because I don't know these people. This is outside of my comfort zone, you know? So that's why I say, you know, say hi. Just, even if you, peace. Send them peace your way. Send them love your way. You know, red, black, and green. You used to be surprised at how many people are like, oh, okay. Even if they heard you say hello and they don't respond back, it's probably because they weren't expecting to hear it in the first place. So then in their mind, they're like, did they say hi to me? Oh yeah. Oh, well, you know, I won't forget the next time. Right. You know, you see them the next time and say, hey, you will be surprised.
That's true. That's true. You'd be surprised.
And it's the tone of what you say. Don't say hello. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Good morning. You know what I'm saying?
I said hello to you.
Gotcha.
You ain't paying no attention about the right.
All right. So with that note, we had the great Sydney on here. Thank you so much, Sydney, for sharing with us your wisdom, your gems. Kyle is definitely gonna elaborate on that. I've learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So to reach me on social media, Twitter, Instagram is Balogun Logic, BALOGUNLOGIC. My platforms on YouTube is Kyrie De Bentley for just scriptural things that I talk about, on Candid Advisor, advice on career development, relationships, and then Perspective TV, where I do one-to-one interviews similar like this in a more intimate setting. So that's how you reach me. Not to forget 4ts.org, which is my organization. And Kyle, I always forget, I'm not gonna forget this time, Grand Rising Collective on YouTube. Check us out on Facebook. That said, Kyle is gonna reiterate that, Kyle, your handles. And then Sydney, last, definitely not least, we want to hear how people can contact you with Kyle, and then Sydney.
Yes, indeed, family. So yeah, you can contact me on Instagram, DIX_KYLE. And you can also contact me on Twitter, KEASY773, which is KEASY773. Also on Facebook, I'm on there as well. Also on YouTube on my own channel, Mr. Kyle Dixon. You can hit me up on that too. All right. So Sydney, without, you know.
Yeah, mine is easy. So TOFU Chitlins on Instagram, TOFU Chitlins on Twitter. I have a YouTube page, but I don't really use it as much as I should. Facebook is where you can find a lot of my work. So the TOFU Chitlin Circuit, the TOFU Chitlin Circuit, without the apostrophe. And then Black Girls Can Fly, one word with no apostrophe, no parentheses.
Awesome.
So that's it.
Awesome.
Nice.
Cal will remind us, so we'll have your handles in the description of the video anyway, specifically. All I got to do is click on and get access to you that way. Thank you so much. How we usually end, we do the peace sign on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, peace.
Yeah. baby, yeah. You know, say ready on this. You know I have patience.